And we're live. Hey, Cal, how are you?
Good to see you.
I'm excited to be there. It's going to be a cool one. So we're going to leave maybe a few minutes for people to join, but we're very excited to be doing this kind of live conversation, you and I. Some of this conversation came from a lot of other topics and conversation we had in the past, but we felt it was the right time for us to dive a little deeper into the topic of centralized versus decentralized AI, which feels like it's on top of everyone's mind.
Very much so. It's a conversation I have a lot.
So for the people out there who don't know who Cal Norton is, I'm going to do a short intro, but I feel that everybody kind of already knows who you are. But you came from Shopify straight to owner.com, where you added go-to-market globally as a CRO. And you brought the company from around 2 million AR, if I remember properly, to close or above 100 million of AR. So a wild ride at owner.com. And I think what you've done that is quite different than most is you've actually taken a lot of thought on how to engineer growth and leveraging AI, to be able to do that. And you're sharing those tips also on the Revenue Leadership podcast that you host with Pavilion on a regular basis. So, Cal, thank you for being here. Super excited to have you.
Yeah, looking forward to it. This is a topic I love, so excited.
Awesome. So maybe before we kick things off, this came from the presentation you did at RevStar in June, where you walked through the audience on how to build a go-to-market AI native organization and the kind of steps that you need to do in order to transform there. And I remember vividly there was one very important element, the topic of this conversation, which drew a lot of attention, is the concept of where do we start? Should we centralize or decentralize? Everybody's given a cloud license to everyone, and it's been a bit of the Wild West. And you are very opinionated about the where this should go. And we decided that we wanted to just double click on this one, centralized versus decentralized, and walk you, the audience, through the framework that you have, to make the right decision. So if you're ready to dive in, we can go.
Yeah, and so let me just define what this means, centralized versus decentralized. There have been two approaches that have emerged to adopting AI in the go-to-market org. One has been everybody's got to learn AI, everybody needs a cloud license, every rep should be out there like building their own things, and it's basically let 1,000 flowers bloom, and we'll pick the best things and then try to get them spread across more people. But it's largely this like bottoms up endeavor that is like everybody's got to be AI native, and that makes a lot of sense on its face. And in many companies, that is the right approach, especially if you're selling AI. Like you have to use the product yourself and sort of like have that expertise. But for many organizations, what I have seen play out is this decentralized approach is a distraction. And you end up with all of these people tinkering with Claude and ChatGPT and the harnesses and like OpenClaw, Hermes, et cetera, to try to build their own things, and everybody's duplicating stuff. And you don't get a lot that is like production grade out of it, because we're salespeople. We're not software engineers. We're not AI engineers or applied AI experts. And so you quickly build a bunch of stuff that is cool and like really shiny, fun demos. But you look around as a CRO, you're like, none of my metrics has changed. Like I've got everybody doing all this AI stuff. All these reps are posting their skills and workflows in the Slack channel, and it's like really exciting. But like all my metrics are basically the same as where they were before. And that I think has been the problem that has confounded revenue leaders, founders, other executives. And the centralized model is, you can take a lot of inspiration from your frontline sellers and your managers, but a centralized model is one in which you have a team of experts. We call them applied AI folks. You can call them GTM engineers or whatever it might be, but you have a central team that's going to like actually build the systems that get used at scale. And what you find with a centralized team is that is where you start to see like actual business impact. And so these are these like two models. And so there's a few reasons why. So like first is the caliber of what an applied AI engineer who has a software engineering background and understands software architecture, what they build isn't just going to be like 20% or 30% better than what your like rep who's never written a line of code in their life has built. Like they're going to build something probably that's like 5 or 10x better, or maybe 100x better, honestly, because if the baseline is like almost zero value, what those people build is going to be so much higher that it was essentially like a waste for anybody else to attempt it. And then also you have this idea of compounding, and a centralized team is going to be able to build this architecture in a way that you have the proper connectivity. You've got the right context and government and governance, roles and permissions, the right access, like tooling. And so people call this the harness. Like there's a lot of conversation around building the go-to-market harness that brings all of these things together in the right ecosystem. And like Vasco is a very interesting example of this. Everybody is using Claude to query their Snowflake instance or Salesforce because it's easy to set up those MCPs. But then when you get back, like it's really compelling analysis. You're like, oh wow, this information's so great. And then like half of it is wrong. And it's just like it's inaccurate. You're like, wait a second, like that's not how many reps I have. That's not what the ARR was. And as soon as you start to like pick away at it, hopefully you've realized it before you shared it, because I see a lot of that as well. You start to see this all disintegrate because you don't have this like harness above it, which is telling the agents what is what in your data ecosystem and what information is up to date and what is not, and what tables they should access. And so like Vasco as a product is actually an interesting analogy for this like centralized model, because you see this all the time. Every manager and every director and VP is like writing their own queries into the databases and like coming back with analysis, and none of it matches up because you need this harness. And like Vasco is the harness for that sort of like the GTM data stack as an example. And so then you can, once you have the right harness, then I can build the right reports and automations and dashboards that I go back to consistently. And so that system can improve upon each other. And so maybe I'll just pause there before we get into some of these.
So yeah, absolutely. And it's quite interesting because we're seeing a poll here that is showing that a lot of people are still exploring. So this topic is very, very much still in the depth of what people are doing. So that centralization is key, because this is where you actually have things that compound. I'm going to throw the previous slides and come back here. You have a ladder to actually measure whether or not you're centralized or decentralized, and it goes into 4 stages. Can you walk kind of the common folks on what those ladders are and what they mean, and why L3 is actually pivotal in everything that you said?
Yeah. So this is a riff on Brendan Short's framework. So he runs a really awesome GTM AI Substack called The Signal. If you're on this webinar, you should all go subscribe to his Substack. And essentially what I'm trying to lay out is like a maturity ladder. From like basically not doing anything. Basically you're just using ChatGPT to answer questions instead of Google. That would be like level 0. Hopefully nobody's still there. And all the way to this top, which I'll talk about, recursive loops. So level 0 is like, I'm basically just using ChatGPT instead of Google. Level 1 is, okay, we're starting to build a bunch of these tools, and I've got like one chat in Claude that I go back to consistently to help me with pre-call prep, because I've like built a mega prompt in there. And then, people are starting to build skills out of that, and you can invoke that skill. But like, this is happening sort of everywhere. And maybe you have some shared skills through your enterprise license. But like, it's just grassroots, and everybody's doing a bunch of different stuff. Level 2 is when you start to build like automated workflows that plug into multiple systems and can take inputs, turn it into like a very different output, and then feed it into the rep, and like do a task for them, like updating their Salesforce, and then alerting people that need to know that that opportunity has like progressed, or it needs like some other support. That'd be like level 2. Lots of companies are here now. And either you're building it straight out of the foundation models, or maybe you're using like Dust or Gumloop or N8N or Make or Zapier, like if you're doing it more on your own. But that's like level 2. And you can get there without a big centralized team, because you just have, savvy people. Those products are pretty straightforward to use. You can get in there and like, your growth manager is doing some stuff. Your BDR manager or director is like doing some things. But it doesn't like compound, because they're not that connected to each other. Level 3 is when you start to see go-to-market AI as a broader set of infrastructure, and things should all be connected. So like, if an agent talks to a customer, or an agent helps a rep prepare for that call, that information, we don't want it locked away in that Claude thread or that ChatGPT chat. We want that pulled back into a central context layer, so that we know that thing about the customer forever. And we can build upon that data. When my call recorder then updates Salesforce, it can update that context layer. And your agents can call to other sub agents. So if you have a very clearly defined ICP, you have an ICP file, you want anything that needs to understand your ICP, all of those agents, to be able to call to that file that is like your ICP, your positioning, how you talk about and deal with competitors, product features, and like how-tos. You might have like 20 agents or 100 agents that all need to use some of these central files, but it needs to be thought through. Somebody needs to have the systems architecture conversation to understand how you build this scaffolding so that you're using the right things. And like, Vasco, as part of that scaffolding, is this like context curation and management layer, so that anytime you're asking questions about the performance of the business, you're getting like real answers, and not AI slop answers that lead you. And so that would be an example of like, now I have this system. It's not individuals just like doing ChatGPT queries to databases, but it is this like compounding environment where I am controlling the context. I'm like curating who can access what information in a thoughtful manner that then allows you to get better at everything that is under it. The reports, the dashboards, the automations, that's all there. And yeah, go ahead, and then I'll talk level 4.
And I think I'm emphasizing on the importance of level 3, because I think you shared some of the stats, but like 89% of agents actually never ship to production. And most folks out there, they've deployed agents, they've bought solution, but they couldn't tell you very clearly what was the ROI. And I think that's the direct consequence of never reaching really L3 and having some things that look really cool in a demo. But to impact the business, you need to be able to trust, to have the infrastructure and everything that is behind, so that it's actually connected and it compounds, as you said.
Yeah. And so I think a really common experience, and when I say this out loud, you see a lot of like head nodding or like heavy sighs. It's really easy like it takes minutes to get something from 0 to 80% good with AI. Like it's really easy to get to a prototype. It's really hard to go from 80% done, which is actually not really good enough to be in production. If something is wrong 20% of the time or does something the wrong way 20% of the time, you have so much human in the loop that it wasn't even worth like maybe automating it in the first place. So, but it's really easy and fun to get there. Like, you know, you're just yammering away into Whisper Flow and telling Fable you want to build this whole thing and it looks awesome. And you're like, I'm a software engineer now. And
vibe coding is the new thing.
Yeah, but that thing is like not actually good enough to move the business metrics, because you're like, oh, like, yeah, but I can't actually let everybody use it because right now it accesses all of my data. And like, I only want, you know, account executives and BDRs to see this type of data. You're like, is my rippling, like, is my employee data in Snowflake? And does this thing MCP into all of that? So like, there's like those types of questions that are beyond the technical pedigree of oftentimes, and I see a manager, director, and go to market that you do actually need to solve before you get the real ROI. And so, so all of these things, like, it's really exciting and fun to do, but then you never get it past that line because like it's minutes to get to 80% and then like hours and hours and hours to go from 80 to 90 to 95%. And a lot of the time that's like doing the difficult stuff, like building evals and having a data set to give to this model to test itself on. And you need to like, you know, pilot it and get feedback and then fix it. And then your like level of enthusiasm quickly dwindles and you're like, all right, I actually don't want to build this anymore. So
but you know, it's like every engineering team. When you've never been an engineer, you think that you're almost there. But when you've been there enough, you realize that the 5 to 10% last mile actually takes you like 60 to 70% of the time. And here, like, you're engineering growth. So it touches a little bit the same thing. And it's true. Like, if you don't invest in this, then that remaining 10% is going to be infinite. So let's look at the results there. We had a poll with the people watching. How is AI currently deployed on your revenue team? We use AI, but haven't thought about scaling and centralizing, 8%. Every rep and teams build their own, so that's the decentralized approach, almost 40%. A central team builds everything for everyone, 8%. And you have a good 46%. We're still exploring, but nothing's in production. When you look at number like that, Cal, what's your first like reaction?
My reaction is that I live in a bubble. Because obviously, like, I spend a lot of time with some of the like most cutting edge companies that are doing interesting things, because that's who I want to benchmark with. And so having so few people take a centralized approach, I'm really surprised by, especially because I've been out there talking about this for the better part of a year. But it means there's a lot of opportunity.
I agree.
We'll make sure we spend time on talent. Like, who should be managing this team, I think, is a big question. And it's an unclear one. But I'm definitely surprised.
If there's anything we can maybe do to help the audience there, is often people talk about AI and they don't really know how it's going to impact the metrics. But I think one of the most powerful slides that you've put at RevStar in June was to actually show not just the cool things, but the business metrics that this infrastructure that you've put in place have impacted. And I think every person in RevOps or in the market that is a bit serious, they shouldn't just show the demo, they should say how it's going to move the business forward. Those metrics are quite impressive. Can you walk us through them and you know, how they matter for you day to day at Honor?
Yeah. So the one that gets everybody's attention is this 20x. So that basically means if a sales rep at Owners is taking home 150K, then they're producing like $3 million in ARR, close one per year. And like, we're not selling tokens. Like those stats, if you're Anthropic or base 10, or like if you're in the token flow, maybe you're not that as exciting. But for a SaaS company selling to SMB, just goes to show like how much we've squeezed out of the productivity of this whole system.
Yep.
And this is up, I can't remember what the exact stat is, but like 3x over the last like 12 or 18 months. And so that type of rep productivity powers everything else. It lets you spend in marketing and spend in brand and have a big product team that's giving you a bigger gap to your competitors. This like level of go-to-market efficiency is just like a monster company advantage. Same thing on the BDR side. So like the average BDR closes $102,000 in close one ARR every month. So it's like $1.2 million a year per BDR. Again, like the economics of that like drastically change the trajectory of your company. I have like, okay, we have a 4x close one per rep to competitors. I was actually talking to somebody who knows a bunch of these companies recently, and it's even more than 4x. And it's like for some companies, we're like 10x the BDR output of some of our like much bigger competitors. And so if I have 10 BDRs, if my 10 BDRs are doing what 100 BDRs do at another company, it's just such an advantage. And so this is where you get to. Like, this is where you can get to with the centralized approach. Like I won't guarantee, because I try not to talk in hyperboles, but like I strongly do not believe you could get to these types of output metrics with a decentralized approach. Because I'm pretty, like, for a CRO, for a non-technical person, I'm pretty savvy with all these things. I can build a lot of my own stuff. I've built like a whole like AI chief of staff for myself. And what I build is like so bad compared to what the applied AI guys that I know build. And so you need that like next level of expertise to get to this type of output. Because you're also like, if we go back to this slide, if you want to get to the end state where the best companies will get to probably this year, you're starting to see some glimmers of this recursively self-improving GTM system. And so like, what the hell does that mean? It basically means that like your system makes itself better without you doing anything. And so you hear that called like loop engineering, or graph engineering is like the new in vogue thing in the software engineering world. But it basically means like an agent does some task and it like gives a rep like a lead, or it picks a lead or prepares them for the call. And then there's another agent that inspects, okay, rep A gave this information to the sales rep to use on the call, and he used this 30% of that information and not this. And so that becomes feedback and input to, this is the loop. That loop goes back to the first agent to make its skill or workflow better. It's like, okay, it won't make it on just one call, but over like 100 calls, all of that feedback goes in. It's like, oh, every time we feed the rep this type of information, they use it, but never this type. Okay, we're not going to ship that information anymore. And so you have this loop. And right now, lots of companies are doing this with human in the loop. So they'll like run the analysis, they'll inspect it, then they'll manually tweak that skill or workflow. But we are, and I know one company who is starting to do this today. And they have like monster like engineering pedigree. But like companies are going to get here where like the skills and the agents you build are just going to get better on their own because they go through these loops. And then your system just gets better on its own. And I don't know, like, until I get to build that myself, I don't have any lessons there, but like there's gonna be a whole set of problems. Like then where do I engage as the revenue leader? How do we move things, tweak it, understand, like not lose control? Maybe we do have to just give up control. Like that you cannot possibly get there. I can't build that. You need real like high level software engineers to do that.
Yeah. And it comes back to what you said. And I think this is a great example of the system that learns. And when the system learns, then it compounds. You've been speaking, because you live in the Valley now, so it's kind of VC land, and a lot of VCs out there and a lot of startups. And you hear those VCs and private equities saying, you need to do more with less, or you need to have, the new metric is ARR per employee. And this is the new thing they're looking at, and how did AI impact your business and your ability to scale fast? And I think that's what you demonstrated with the metrics that we had before. And this is the system that gets you the level of productivity per individual that actually changes that metric that VC talk about. And the good thing there is it leads with the input, right? You don't start with ARR per employee. You start by, okay, what does that mean? Which KPIs? And then the sum of them get you there. So super cool. I want to make sure that we can touch some of the other content. Once you've decided to go centralized, we trust you, Cal. You've shown the number. They're phenomenal. I want the same thing for my business. You don't want to build everything, right? Some of the stuff you really want to own. Some of the stuff you kind of want to buy and not reinvent the wheel. Everybody's talking about vibe coding their CRM. So like, it's a thing now. So can you walk us through kind of the mental model you go after when you think about, okay, what do I buy? What do I build?
Yeah. So, and the line shifts rapidly. Like, every model release, maybe this gets different. Like, what Fable can do and what you can do internally with Fable plus open models. Like, this is a moving ecosystem. But let me anchor us in these like key questions that would determine whether or not I build versus buy. And so it's those top left 5 things. So question 1 is, how important is uptime and stability? If this tool that you've built goes down, is it total chaos and you have 200 sales reps that can no longer do their job that day? Not a good thing. Not a good thing to be vibe coding unless you have like a very special software pedigree and a lot of engineers that are supporting you. So uptime, like really high uptime and reliability requirements, leads me more to buy. Uniqueness, like I don't want to build a bunch of stuff unless it's different than what I could buy off the shelf. And so like, does this actually lead to you doing business in a different way and give you a competitive edge, which relates to number 3, which is the engineering ROI. Because if you are building something that is not that different than the off-the-shelf tool, maybe the off-the-shelf tool is so expensive that vibe coding it or building it internally justifies it, but like pretty rarely. I want to understand like how much engineering resource is going to have to go into this, and like what does it get me in return? So if you have like low uniqueness, like low differentiation and output, so like it moves some metric 5%, but is very difficult to build and maintain, then just buy it. I want to point my like very limited engineering resources at the things that really, really move the needle. And then like how replicable is this is an important question. And then ultimately like, ultimately does this like give me an advantage as a buyer or as a builder? And so like you see some examples, like what should you buy? Well, you could API into Twilio and vibe code your own dialer, and you could make that look like unique for your environment. But there's a lot of stuff on top of a dialer to manage local presence and spam flags and like how it all works. And like, are you really going to build a dialer that's that different than what's out on the market? that would lead you to take on a big engineering challenge. Like it would take a lot to build a highly reliable, stable dialer that like has all these other things. Like the differentiation is very low, and the ROI, the engineering cost is very high, so the ROI is not very good. So just like buy a dialer, your data warehouse. Don't bother rebuilding Snowflake. Like just buy Snowflake. And this like context graph is another one where like I want to own the data within it for sure. I want to have access to it, but like, is this a technical problem that you want to solve on your own? Like this is a really tough one. Like the engineering and architecture requirements to do this well, both in sort of like GTM data, like where Vasco is, and then just like this broader question of like, how do you manage your whole organization and build agents? That's probably a buy. What is a build? Okay, stuff that is like very different from your for your organization. So like building a pre-call research agent is a good example, because there's not a lot of people out there that are going to build a tool that is like custom for your environment. You sell to manufacturing companies in North America that fit this profile, and I want to know this exact data, and we're going to scrape it from these places. Like not a lot of people are going to have that off the shelf. And so that's one that I can definitely build on my own. And when you say build, like you could build that in Clay. You don't have to like code it from scratch, but we have built our own like research agents internally. But because that is very custom to my environment, it's going to be very unique and is not very difficult to build. It's just like scrapers, some waterfall enrichment, and then filling in some fields in a database. So that then are going to end up in like Snowflake and Salesforce. That's like not a complex thing to build, but could actually move the needle if your reps are much more prepared for every single call. Like churn analysis, churn alerts. Like there's some things that you could definitely think about building yourself, where especially it's like really custom. It's like Slack bots. Yeah, there's lots of really interesting Slack bots that you can build on your own on top of that like broader Slack agent platform that is like hyper specific to your environment. And those are good, like those are good examples. And so in some of these, like I'm actually talking about building within another platform. And so this goes back to this architecture question of an architecture question that should really be answered by technical people, and maybe and not a CRO, and maybe not even the RevOps leader, but like what is the full data picture and engineering picture here?
Because you need a ton of context in order to make sure that those are actually relevant and accurate. So it is indeed where kind of most of the conversation is right now, is how do you fit that stack so that when it reasons on your data, then it remains accurate. And speaking about the stack, you have actually kind of laid out some layers in order to give the people kind of an idea of the kind of things you'd buy versus the thing you'd own, and where you split the difference between the two. The idea is, I think you don't want to have someone in your data team that scraps every roadmap and try to rebuild every tool internally, but there's still a few things where they can have that massive ROI that you mentioned for a small amount of engineering. So can you walk us through this little model that you've put together here?
Yeah. So this is also just like a good model for everybody to ground themselves in when you're building your go-to-market AI stack. And so we all know what a model is, or like the LLMs. So that's your OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, or open source models that you are calling to, which have tons and tons of power, but can be undirected. And they could answer in a whole bunch of different ways. And they could be like too wordy. They can make shit up. They can like there's a bunch of things that happen in a model that you want to direct in a better way. And so like the Substack article that I wrote, the model is like the like wild horse, and you need to put a harness on the horse. They need a bit, and you need reins, and you need a saddle and stirrups. Like that is how you take the wild power of a horse and you now direct it for some outcome to take you from one place to another. And much easier to ride a horse. I haven't done a lot of riding, but a little. Much easier to direct a horse when you have a bit and reins and stirrups to be very productive than just like on a horse bareback, which almost nobody does, and is extraordinarily difficult. And that's your harness. And so that is what is helping the model then connect into the right tools in your ecosystem with the right governance. So I want to connect to Snowflake through an MCP or whatever it may be, but I don't want every single person to have access to everything that is possibly in Snowflake. You might have employee data or sensitive health information if you're in that type of a sector, or like there might be information about customers you really don't want other people to know. And so the harness is like all of these things around it. So it's the tools and connections to other things, plus the governance, like roles and permissions to tell the model what it can and cannot access. It is the context layer of like, what are the other things that our agents might want to, what are the other things our agents need to know to answer questions properly? And like, you can explain state versus stateless, like that's now I'm going to butcher it, but like it is giving you the scaffolding around the model to make the model productive. And so like Claude is like your Claude chat interface is a harness. ChatGPT is a harness. It's like taking the model and directing it in a way because it's got connectors and it's able to do research on the web. Like those are things not native to the model itself. Those are things that are being put around it. So that's the harness. And then context and retrieval, that's all the information about the customer, your company that an agent or a model might need to like reason or do things productively. And then how does it get there? And then memory is like short-term context, I would say. Guillaume, correct me if I'm wrong here.
You can have different state of memories, but indeed, you want to have a built-in memory so that you don't have to tell it every single time the same thing, and it starts to learn. For instance, you mentioned many times, like, I don't want to have to re-upload my QBR deck every single time I'm asking a question for a specific thing. Built-in memory is about that.
Yeah. And how do you differentiate that between memory and context? Like QBR decks, that is memory and not context?
In this very specific one, the QBR deck, what you've learned in the QBR becomes memory. So the memory is about the things that you've tried that have failed, or the things that you've tried that have worked, and that is then stored as a memory so that you don't retry it again 6 months, 12 months down the road. And it feeds then the rest of the context. Then on the other context, which is more like, what are the bets that we want to make this quarter? What are the decisions that we've decided to not pursue, or things like that? That would be more on the context side of things. So the fun piece of memory is when the agents, because you can trace the reasoning of every agent, when the agent feeds back the context with, this is how I reason, and then you can understand the reasoning of the agents, and then you can discover whether or not that reasoning yielded to a closed won or a closed lost. And then that context compounds, and it serves as a more global memory, and then the system learns itself. But you're right, like the split between context and memory is a bit blurry, and it's worth noting.
Yeah, that's helpful. And the last thing here is like evals, which most people skip, but it's incredibly important. It's just the tests. So when you build an agent, evals are the set of tests that you're having the agent perform to understand if that thing did the job or not. And typically your evals, the output of your eval becomes an input to then make that agent better over time. And I don't want to build the tooling that does evals, like Prompt Layer is an example of a company in this space. So you could use that, and then the rubric, you're building your own. you're building your own, and you should own that context, and that context should be readily available for all agents and people to be able to leverage. And so there's like different things in these stacks that you want to build and own. Like the key definition is like, I want to own the intelligence. Like what I'm careful of is tools that lock away the intelligence that it generates. And so you see this a lot in GTM tech, where there's a bunch of cool stuff that tool does, and it's learning all of these amazing things from the interactions it tracks, and it's stored away in a black box. And it does not come back to this like compounding corpus of memory and context that then lets you make every other agent in the company get better over time. And so I'm trying to be really cognizant of this, that like, a tool can generate intelligence and use intelligence. That's amazing. But I want to be able to have access to that and then reconcile it with everything else. And so like your AI SDR needs to be able to feed back that information to what Vasco, the context that Vasco has access to, so that when I'm in Vasco asking questions, that information is available, or else I have an incomplete picture of my organization. And so I'm like, I really want to be cognizant about this brain, and like, what is the company brain that is getting built over time? The example you used, Guillaume, on the things we've tried, like the lessons we've learned in our MBRs and QBRs and on sales calls, like we want that to compound over time, and I don't want that locked away in any one place.
And I think you said it extremely well. The risk is rented learning. And if you do that, then you decide to change vendor, or someone leaves the company and walks out, and you've lost your brain. And I think in the world of AI and go-to-market, like that can be really disastrous.
Yeah, and a good example is the foundation models. So you use these models for so long, and they really get to know you. And this is one of the great strengths of these products, and why they're so compelling and useful, is because it built in their harness is a memory layer that is compressing and learning from every single one of your chats and updating its memory so that it can help you better in the future. So that when I ask it, let's use a personal example, when I ask it about like planning a road trip to Utah, it knows I've got 2 young kids and I like outdoor stuff and I like blah, 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 blah. All of that is there, but I have no access to that context. I can say, hey, give me an output of everything that you possibly know about me. But the memory in Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, those don't feed back in automatically somewhere else, which is why I typically use Claude Code and not Claude App, because my Claude Code is set up to update consistently a central GitHub repo of all of these files. So every skill that I build in my OpenClaw instance or in Claude Code or anywhere else, if I wanted to add a Hermes agent to it, it's always going back to this central GitHub brain. Same thing with the memories. Like I've got this dossier all about me, like a personal dossier. I've got like a work dossier, basically like, how do I think about company building? What are my heuristics? How do I make decisions? So that when I go and I'm doing a task that I want it to have a lot of knowledge about how I think about the world, all of that is there, and sort of like the map of that information is available in one like master file in sort of that like README file, basically. And so you want your company to operate the same way. I want to have this like master layer where all of this information is being stored at, so that if I build an agent in Agentforce or an OpenClaw agent or something, if I put it internally myself, it still is coming back to this like central place. It's not easy.
And because it's in GitHub, it's probably versioned, so you get the new information that gets merged and so on, and you can have a little something called temporality, which I think is a bit geeky, but it's the information that just happened 5 minutes ago probably carries more weight than an information that conflicts and that was 2 years ago. I think someone explained it well. It says, like, if I were to carry and build a map of all the movies that you've watched in your life, if you watched a ton of movie when you were 18, the AI is going to say, well, maybe that's the kind of movie that you like, but maybe you don't watch those movies anymore. And the last 10 movies that you watch are actually those. And if you put them all into the same proportion and you don't have the temporality, so more recently, this is who I am and this is the state of the world, you kind of lose that view and it becomes kind of a melting pot of information that is half wrong because half obsolete.
Yeah. One of my favorite things that you guys have written is like the why Claude lies thing, and like how just like the data on how wrong that analysis. Oh, we have a slide for it. There we go.
Perfect segue.
Yeah. Like, I think this is one of the most interesting insights that you've shared with me about, like, you know, why are these tools why are they so wrong so much of the time, even though it like looks really compelling, and maybe just like what the technical reasons are for that.
Yeah. And there's a big hype, by the way, right now in Twitter and the Valley and so on about context graph, knowledge graph, and everything that revolves around that. But if you strip out the technical part of it, what this is what is the infrastructure that is going to make your agent reason accurately? So when it gives you an answer, you can actually trust it. Not consume 10x the volume of token because it needs to find its path every single time again. And also fast enough. So you don't want all the data. You just want the data it needs to make that decision, because you don't want to have the agents look at the entire brain before it actually comes back with an answer. If you want an answer for marketing, it doesn't need to look at the customer success piece of the organization, for instance. So I know you've been like geeking a bit on context graph, knowledge graph, like anything you can share on those. I know it's a moving kind of topic, but I'd love to hear your take on this.
Yeah, you're actually better to answer this question because I've learned a bunch of this from you. But I think if I'll just set it up, and then maybe you can explain some of the details. So the context graph is basically like, what is all the information about your customers, your organization, how your database tables are built that helps these agents reason about it. Because if you don't give an agent a very good map and it just has to write queries constantly into all of these different places, then everything is very slow. You're just like incinerating tokens. And so these are sort of these are the inputs to building that context graph. And so maybe you can explain this stuff, because honestly, I learned a lot of it from you that I know.
I think you did it great, because sometimes I have the tendency to go more into the technical, but the context graph is exactly what you said. It has 6 major components. The first one is your context lives in 6 different tools. Like you have Gong, Salesforce, Slack, blah, blah, blah. You have to make sure that you reconcile Acme 1 to 3 in all those 6 different tools. Otherwise, your Salesforce might say something and then it's contradicted into your Slack and you don't know which one is accurate. And you need to recreate the accounts dossier, as Jordan Crawford would say, or the accounts timeline. So, if a customer tells you, or if you want to hear the pain point from a customer, what you're looking for is actually why did they try to buy your solution? But if you don't have that in place, the agent might answer like reset password, because when they were onboarded, someone in a ticket on Zendesk said, I can't reset my password, please help me with this. So you want to make sure that you anchor the context within where it is in the customer journey, or the bow tie, if you're familiar with kind of revenue architecture and winning by design. Then, every company is a bit different. You have an MQL definition in owner.com. I think you call them AQL, actually. It's different from one company to the next. If you don't write it, Claude is going to try to guess it back. And we've all known Salesforce instances It's not the cleanest thing that ever happened there. So if you don't actually declare those, it's going to try to find the most probable thing you mean by MQL, and it's going to come out 3 times differently.
And sometimes it's
and then,
different across tools.
Yep. You can have, for instance, that customer is active, but you realize that actually it's canceled the subscription in the billing engine. But if it didn't find its path, it's there. The 3 other ones are a little more technical. We talked about memory and causality, but the one is, like, if you want to know what good looks like, you need to have your targets in your plan in the graph too, because I did 1.5 million of pipeline. Is it good or is it bad? I don't know. If you tell me what was your targets, I can tell you whether it was bad or not. And there's going to be 1 million of data points. You actually want to just like surface the 3 that has the most impact, because there's so much you can act on. And the best way to understand the impact is the distance between your actuals against the plan. So those are the components. If I were to summarize it, like back in the days when you were building BIs, you would have the data lake, which is basically where you have stored all the information across your tools. And then you would have your reports on Looker or Tableau. And the little thing in the middle that makes sure that your reports are accurate, good, and insightful is the semantic layer. And it's the metric definitions and everything. The context graph is kind of the semantic layer, but purpose-built for agents. So that's a simple way to put it.
That makes a lot of sense. And a very difficult, going back to our question on build versus buy, a very difficult technical problem to solve, because I know you've been sweating it now for a while.
Oh yeah. It's complex to scale. But coming back on what you own the plan, you own how the graph things, you own the metric definitions, you own what you put in there. So the ICP, who's your ICP. And I think you should never delegate that intelligence to an agent, because maybe it's going to be there in a couple of years, but right now those are still like really core to the thing you see on the business. And that needs to be kind of still your own, and you can't delegate fully to an agent. I wanted to maybe conclude on one last slide, because we've talked about infrastructure, but when you have that centralized model and you've done the right choices, you can start deploying an army of agents and get some kind of the numbers that you've talked to in the beginning of the presentation, which are massive movements. And you can start thinking about every human in the organization is enhanced by an agent. You've deployed a lot of agents inside owners.com. Could you maybe walk us through a couple of them that were massive hits and really made a difference, and a few other ones maybe that were great in theory, but in the end, like, just collapsed epically?
Yeah. A lot of where we focused our efforts in the last sort of 12 months after we spun up this applied AI team was the BDR organization. Pipeline saves lives. Like, if you want to reason about where you should apply AI for the most benefit, generating pipeline's a pretty high likelihood one. And so we've built a few things. Like, one is a scoring model that figures out across our entire TAM of hundreds of thousands of prospects exactly who we should be spending the most amount of time with, and then ranking those and delivering them every day to the BDRs. Then we go one step further, and we actually take information about that prospect and synthesize it so that we can tell the BDR exactly what they can say to this customer to get their attention. So, the name of a customer we think they'll know, it's in their local area, for example, or friends of mine have built flows where it looks at like, where have you worked, where have our customers worked, and basically prioritizes reaching out to all of their leads that worked at their customers' companies with some direct overlap. It's like, okay, you were Stripe 2014 to 2017. We've got these prospects that were also Stripe, 2015 to 2020. And so we know that the incremental lift of having a happy customer that they know well, it's like, oh, do you know, I was at Shopify before this, Like, do you know John Smith from Shopify? I'd be like, oh yeah, like he was like a peer of mine in another segment. Well, he's a customer. Oh, cool. Like you'll automatically get more traction with that customer. And so stuff like this, we've built a bunch of this into what we call AI pre-call research. And so at Owner, we gave all the BDRs information that they can use to have a higher quality conversation. And that's really, really productive for conversion rates. And then if we flip all the way to the other side, like what's useful for me, like having information to understand the business at scale and depth. Like the challenge of being a CRO is you have to like juggle a lot. You have to be able to like keep an eye on many, many things and then be able to go super deep on that thing when it seems to be off. And that's where tools like Vasco come in and let you, especially as a CRO, like answer some of these questions on your own without having to ship it to a data team, wait for multiple days for them to bring you back an answer. And so this like CRO brief is a good example of it. But even more importantly, like when you see something in the CRO brief, being able to self-serve and go deep and find answers to that thing, because previously I would have like gone to Claude and asked a bunch of those questions, and I didn't realize that I was getting so much bogus information. So that's like one at a very like granular level and one at like a very senior strategic level for folks.
Any agents that you should not try to do today that looks amazing as a promise, but every time you hear someone trying to do those, you're like, no, this is going to fail?
Oh, it's so situation dependent. I've seen a lot of people bang their head against the wall with like inbound lead follow-up agents or like agents that are calling people. Yeah, I haven't really seen that work that well yet. But again, the technology is changing so fast. There was just some big like open source like voice model that everybody was like, oh my God, this is gonna completely disrupt the whole market. So you're like you're trying to place smart bets. Maybe here's a better answer. I would actually not, even if you hear something not working a bunch of times, I would be careful not to say that's not going to work and put it into your mind. It's like, that doesn't work right now.
Yeah.
Because, like things change so fast, like, Fable and what I hear about ChatGPT 6 are these are going to be like massive steps forward. And the voice models, the video models, the like, open weight models now giving you like cheap, fast access to intelligence, like not right now is I think like the best way to view some of these things so that you don't dismiss something that maybe might work longer term.
Yeah. What was true 6 months ago is old information already.
Yeah.
Cal, we're at time. Thank you so much. What I really love and appreciate every of your talk, you talk about frameworks so that people understand where they need to play, but then you can go really, really deep into concrete example, and it shows that you've actually implemented those internally. So I think it's always a goldmine of information, and I'm always reading your Substack in order to learn more about those stuff. So thank you so much for being with us today, Cal. And I hope you had a good time, but I'm sure the audience learned a ton. And if there's one thing to take away, is centralized AI is the thing that's going to get you to compound. Maybe you want to have a final word, like a word of encouragement.
Let's leave it there.
Or the thing.
That's a good, if I can get that 8% to 50, 60%, we will have done our job.
That's true. Thank you so much, my friend.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.